My name is Chloe Hanley, and 6 weeks after my own family cut me out of my sister's wedding, I threw a rival beachfront party the same night, with a full floral arch, sparklers, and half the cousins dancing under the stars. My mother called me an embarrassment. I told her she should have aimed that word at her own reflection. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever been treated like a stranger in your own family, this story is for you. It happened on a Tuesday, just one of those regular Charleston evenings where the air smelled faintly of jasmine and leftover humidity. I had just gotten home from work, kicked off my heels, and dropped my purse on the console table, thinking I might pour a glass of wine and finally open the book I'd been meaning to read. Instead, I found them. 3 ornate wedding invitations. Ivory cardstock, gold foil, thick enough to make a thud when I lifted one off the counter. At first, I didn't recognize the name printed in script. Vanessa Hanley and Nicholas Carver request the honor. My hand froze midair. Vanessa, my younger sister, getting married. No one had said a word. I stared at the invitations like they might change if I blinked fast enough. There was no mistake. This wasn't a save the date. This was the real deal. I held the envelope to my chest and stood in the middle of my kitchen, my breath jagged and uneven. I must have stood there for a full minute trying to make sense of it. Maybe there was an explanation, a surprise party, a last-minute elopement, a joke. No, the invitations were addressed, stamped, ready to go, except there wasn't one for me. 10 minutes later, I was driving across the bridge to my parents' house with my hazards on, heart thudding louder than the turn signal. I didn't text. I didn't call. I couldn't trust myself to. The door wasn't locked when I arrived. It never is. My mother believes locks are an admission of guilt. I burst through the entryway without removing my shoes, and both of them, Mom and Dad, looked up from their spots in the living room like I had dropped from the sky. "Where is she?" I asked, brandishing the invitation. "Where's Vanessa?" My mother, June Hanley, Charleston's most polished Southern woman, set down her tea with deliberate grace. "She's out. What's this about?" I held up the card. "You tell me." She raised one eyebrow, unimpressed. "That's private." "Private?" I laughed, sharp and humorless. "You mailed 3 of them from my kitchen. How long were you planning to hide this from me?" She didn't flinch. "We didn't think you'd be interested." The calmness in her voice was the worst part, like she was talking about a book club I didn't join. "Not interested," I repeated, stunned. "She's my sister." My father shifted in his chair, exhaling slowly through his nose the way he always does when he's about to say something cutting but framed as wisdom. "You always make everything about you, Chloe." The words landed hard, like ice water to the chest. For a moment, all I could do was stare at them, my parents, my flesh and blood, acting like I was the problem for not guessing my sister was engaged, planning a wedding and mailing invitations while I sat 2 neighborhoods away like a fool. "You lied to me," I said quietly. "All of you." Mom gave a tired sigh, as if I'd spilled milk instead of trust. "It's not that deep, sweetheart. Vanessa wanted something peaceful, less complicated." Less complicated. Translation, less me. I could feel something trembling under my skin, not just rage but humiliation. I had picked out Vanessa's prom dress. I had covered her rent when she first moved out. I had brought her lemon soup when she had mono for 2 weeks and smelled like Vapo Rub and wet hair, and now this. "You know what?" I whispered. "This tells me everything I need to know." "Don't be dramatic," Dad said, standing now like I was an intruder disturbing the peace. I walked out before I broke something. The air outside was thick and warm, but my skin prickled like I'd stepped into a freezer. In the driveway, I stood next to my car for several minutes before getting in, palms pressed to the roof, eyes closed. They had planned to cut me out completely. Not forget. Not overlook, exclude, deliberately. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced once more at the house where I grew up. A place that now felt foreign, like I'd broken into someone else's life. What hurt the most wasn't being excluded. It was realizing how little it seemed to matter to them. The next morning, the sky over Charleston was soft gray, the kind that makes the whole city feel hushed, like even the air knew something delicate was unfolding. I hadn't slept. Not really. Just closed my eyes and relived that conversation with my parents on repeat until sunrise. I still couldn't wrap my head around it. Vanessa was getting married, and my name had never even made it onto the guest list. I didn't know what I was hoping for exactly as I texted her that morning. Just, "Can we talk? My treat. Anywhere you want." She replied within 10 minutes. "Sure, Callahan's. Noon." Callahan's was a little cafe tucked behind an antique bookstore downtown. She used to love the peach scones there. I picked a blouse that made me feel professional but warm, like I was someone worth respecting, like someone you'd want in your wedding. When I got there, Vanessa was already seated outside, nursing an iced tea. Her hair was in a perfect bun, not a flyaway in sight. She didn't stand up, didn't smile, just tilted her head like she was waiting for an appointment to begin. "Hey," I said gently, sliding into the seat across from her. "Hey," no warmth. No guilt either, just her usual cool detachment. I ordered a coffee and tried not to let the silence swallow us. For a second I imagined reaching across the table and grabbing her hand, saying, "What happened to us?" But instead I smiled carefully and said, "You look really beautiful, engagement's glowing on you." She looked down, almost annoyed. "It's a lot, planning I mean," I nodded. "I figured, Vanessa, listen, I'm not here to rehash everything. I wanted to offer something." She didn't speak, so I continued. "I make good money now, I have some savings, and I'd like to contribute something meaningful, special, maybe flowers or music. I want to be part of it, however I can." She sipped her tea, the ice clinked. "If you really want to," she said slowly, "there's this floral thing, a show, big arrangements, arches. Clara's mom couldn't commit after all, so." A tiny flicker of hope lit up in me. "I'd love to," I said quickly. "Send me the details. Take care of it completely. I want it to be magical for you," she shrugged. "Do what you want, just keep it in the romantic spring theme, white and blush, nothing too extra. Got it?" I nodded like she'd just handed me a golden ticket. Simple elegance, totally my style. She didn't smile, just looked over my shoulder like she had somewhere else to be. "You look tired," she said suddenly. "Everything okay?" It was the first sign she might have noticed the devastation from last night. I almost melted. I was surprised, that's all. I thought we told each other things, big things. Vanessa stirred her drink with the straw, her expression unreadable. "It's not that deep, Chloe." It was always her go-to phrase when she didn't want to feel something. I looked down at my hands in my lap, squeezing them together. "It was to me." She didn't reply. The server dropped off my coffee and our scones. I took a sip and smiled, even though my stomach felt like a fist. "I just want you to know." "I care," I said, voice softer now. "No matter what's happened, you're still my sister, that doesn't change." Vanessa picked up a scone and tapped the plate absently. "Yeah." We sat like that for 10 more minutes. Her on one end of the bench, me on the other, the air between us heavy with unsaid things. Still, as we stood to leave, I let myself believe it was a start. As I watched her walk away down the cobbled sidewalk, her dress swinging gently with each step, I pulled out my phone and opened the florist's site. I'd make it unforgettable. I'd show her I still belonged. Some part of me believed that if the flowers were beautiful enough, maybe she'd remember how much I loved her. 2 days later, I found myself inside the glassy, sun-drenched walls of Blossom & Co., Charleston's most coveted florist for high-end weddings and socialite garden parties. The air inside smelled like crushed peonies and eucalyptus, with soft jazz playing over the ceiling speakers. Everything felt calm, delicate, expensive, like nothing could ever go wrong here. I was early for my consultation, so I wandered among the tables of flower samples, each bouquet more artful than the last. I paused at a sprawling arch made of ivory roses, climbing hydrangea vines, and tiny blush lisianthus that looked like ruffled silk. I could already picture Vanessa under it, wind catching the hem of her dress, the whole thing glowing in that perfect Charleston spring light. "Ms. Hanley," a woman in a dove-gray blouse appeared from behind a counter. "I'm Marable, head designer. Thanks for being patient." We shook hands, and I followed her to a corner table surrounded by mood boards, fabric swatches, and vases in various states of completion. "You said this is for an outdoor ceremony at Cypress Hill Manor, yes?" she asked, pulling up a digital layout on her tablet. "Yes," I nodded. "April wedding, romantic spring theme, white soft blush eucalyptus, no tropicals, nothing too bold. My sister's pretty classic." "She's lucky to have you doing this," Marable said as she scrolled. "You've clearly thought this through." My throat tightened slightly. I smiled but said nothing. We spent the next hour going over every detail. Marable moved like a conductor, pulling together textures and colors and ideas I hadn't even known I had. A garden arch bursting with cascading roses, individual centerpieces of sweet pea and ranunculus in antique glass vases, tiny wax flowers in the aisle to mimic early spring blooms. She even suggested a subtle floral choreography, timed blooming arrangements that would open just before dusk for maximum visual impact during photos. It's ambitious, she said, but we can make it happen with our greenhouse rotation. I blinked. That's incredible. Budget range? She asked gently. I hesitated, then pushed the number across the table. It was high, much higher than I'd originally planned, but I knew what I was doing. Maribel's eyes widened slightly. We can do something unforgettable with this. Good, I said. I want it to feel magical. I want her to walk in and just stop. She tilted her head, studying me in that intuitive way some people do when they sense a deeper story. Is this a gift? She asked. It's a gesture, I said, a reminder that I'm still part of the story. Maribel nodded slowly, like she understood more than I was saying. By the time I left, my hands were full with sample photos, a color-coded floral timeline, and a contract that had my signature and initials on every page. It felt official. It felt like proof that I still belonged in Vanessa's orbit, even if no one else saw it that way yet. Outside, the clouds were low and gray, hinting at a warm drizzle later. I paused on the sidewalk, pulling out my phone and typing the message before I could second-guess myself. The flower show's all set. Can't wait for you to see it. You're gonna love it. I added a single heart at the end and hit send. 3 dots appeared for a moment, then vanished. I stood there staring at the screen, holding my breath like it was tethered to those dots. But no reply came. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. She was busy. Probably with fittings or cake tastings or a dozen other things. What mattered was that I'd done something beautiful, something kind, something undeniable. Maybe, just maybe, it would help melt whatever wall had gone up between us. Maybe when she saw the flowers in full bloom, she'd finally remember who helped her pick daffodils for her 5th grade play, who sewed rhinestones onto her dance recital leotard, who stood by her for every milestone. The sun caught the edge of the florist's glass windows, and for a second I saw myself reflected, hair pinned back, holding a manila folder of invoices and floral proofs, looking like someone who had it all together. And yet, underneath the layers of hope and generosity, something inside me whispered, this shouldn't be this hard, but I hushed that thought. Because sometimes when people forget your worth, you remind them. Not with anger, not with tears, with beauty. And so I walked home beneath the quiet clouds, clutching my folder like it might be the bridge back to something lost. The morning air felt like spring itself was holding its breath, warm with a whisper of rain. I arrived early at Cypress Hill Manor, an hour before anyone else was scheduled to be there. The venue sat at the edge of the Ashley River, a long white house with columns wide enough to cradle a memory. The florist's truck was already parked outside. Inside the ballroom, everything smelled like roses and promise. It was quiet, calm, the kind of quiet you only get before something big happens. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. There were crates of candles to unbox, vases wrapped in layers of tissue, and the garden arch still partially constructed in the back courtyard. I moved from task to task like it was second nature, like I'd been part of this plan all along. By the time the second van arrived, this one carrying catering staff and early setup volunteers, I had sweat trickling down the back of my blouse, flower stems staining my fingers, and wax on my palms from testing taper placements. Wow, a voice said behind me. You're like actually doing everything. I turned. It was Clara, Vanessa's college friend, tall, always slightly windblown with the kind of dry humor that could slice a room in half. She was holding a box of napkin rings, her eyebrows raised. Hey, I said, brushing hair off my face. Clara looked around. I thought Vanessa said the florist was handling this. They were short a designer today. I told Maribel I'd come help. Clara smirked. Honestly, you're kind of saving this. I blinked. What? No one else is pulling this much weight, she said, walking past me to set the napkin rings down. You've been here since dawn, that's impressive. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to being seen, at least not in this family, not for effort anyway. Thanks, I managed. For a few minutes, we worked side by side in silence, adjusting placements and lighting the first row of floating candles. Then Clara nudged me gently with her elbow. She might not say it, but I think she knows. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. A couple hours later, the rest of the bridal party began to trickle in, followed by my parents. I saw them enter through the far set of double doors. My mother was in pearls, my father in his crisp golf wear like always. Neither of them looked at me. It shouldn't have surprised me anymore, but the absence of their gaze still scraped something raw inside. I focused on the floral choreography, adjusting stems so the roses would bloom in precise stages as the sun shifted through the tall arched windows. It was subtle work, delicate and timed. Like love, I thought. Then Vanessa walked in. Her heels echoed against the hardwood floor as she surveyed the space, eyes trailing over the archway, the candlelit aisle, the enormous blush arrangements near the altar. For a moment I saw it, that flicker of something in her eyes. Not shock, not awe, but recognition. "You didn't have to do all this," she said flatly, her arms crossed. I met her gaze. "I wanted to," she nodded once, said nothing else. But she didn't criticize, she didn't walk away. She stayed in the room, that in itself felt like something. I bent down to light the last candle near the altar. When I straightened up, I saw my mother walking past, her heels clicking softly on the floorboards, her perfume trailing behind her like a signature. She didn't look at me, not a word. Not a glance. As if I were part of the decor, another flower, another candle, useful but invisible. Still, I stood tall. I pressed my fingers against the small of my back and smiled, because I knew what they didn't. I was the one who made this beautiful. And someone, at least, had finally said thank you. Later that afternoon, the Charleston sun finally broke through the clouds and spilled across the courtyard like spilled honey. The rehearsal setup was paused for a catered lunch break, and most of the bridal party drifted outside with plates of finger sandwiches and strawberry lemonade. I found myself near the rose trellis, just out of the center of the buzz, where the shadows were long, and the jasmine vines clung to the old white fence behind me. Vanessa sat 2 benches over, absently scrolling on her phone, her hair curled perfectly into soft waves that bounced when she laughed at something on screen. One of her bridesmaids, Lena, I think was talking about reception playlists, and Vanessa nodded along, more engaged than I'd seen her all day. I waited until there was a lull, then walked over with a soft smile and a paper cup of lemonade in hand. "Hey," I said, careful to keep my tone light. "I just wanted to check something with you about the ceremony layout." Vanessa looked up, mildly startled, as if I were someone's assistant, not her sister. "I made a few small adjustments to the garden arch," I said. "We added some soft climbers, clematis and blush garden roses, so the blooms will peek right before you walk in. And the floral choreography's timed for sunset. I thought it matched your romantic spring theme." She blinked, then glanced at Lena. There was a pause, just long enough for Hope to breathe, before Vanessa let out a sudden, sharp laugh. Not unkind exactly, but amused in a way that didn't include me. "That old-fashioned stuff," she said, eyebrows raised. "It's kind of embarrassing, Chloe, like something from a prom Pinterest board in 2012. I felt my heart drop like someone had pulled a string inside my chest. "Oh," I said softly, searching her face. "I thought, it's fine," she cut in, looking back at her bridesmaid. "It's done now anyway." And just like that, she turned away. Lena gave me a polite, strained smile before pivoting the conversation back to reception shoes and heel protectors for the lawn. I stood there for a few seconds too long, unsure what had just happened, feeling my body still holding the shape of the effort I'd brought. I'd stayed up late adjusting color palettes. I'd sent Marable 3 revised layout mock-ups to make sure everything matched Vanessa's vision down to the table runners. I'd given days of my life to her, and it was embarrassing. Not beautiful, not thoughtful, embarrassing. "Excuse me," I murmured, then turned before anyone could see the sting in my eyes. I crossed the stone path slowly, heels clicking against the flagstone, and found an empty seat beneath the sycamore tree near the far end of the courtyard. The sun was warm on my back, but I felt cold. I pulled out my phone, pretending to scroll just to look busy. My screen was blank. No new texts. Still no reply to the message I'd sent her 2 days ago about the flowers. Behind me, I could still hear the laughter from the bench where Vanessa sat, her voice light and careless, like none of this mattered. And maybe to her it didn't. I tilted my head up toward the sky and let my eyes close for just a moment. The jasmine on the wind should have been sweet, but it only made my stomach ache. What was I trying to prove? That I was useful enough to keep. That if I gave enough, they'd finally remember I belonged. I told myself this wasn't the time for tears. Not now, not here. So I breathed in deep, smiled at a passing caterer like nothing was wrong, and quietly texted Marable, "Thank you again for everything. It all came out beautiful, I'm grateful." no sarcasm, no bitterness, just truth. Because someone had helped me create something beautiful, and even if it wasn't appreciated by the people I wanted most, I knew the care was real. I stayed beneath that tree for the rest of the break, letting the sun try to thaw the place inside me that had just frozen over. And when it didn't, I told myself I'd find a way to warm it myself. Somehow. That night, back in my apartment, the silence hit different. Not peaceful, not welcome. It was the kind of silence that feels like someone's taken the whole world and turned the volume down just for you, so you can sit with your thoughts echoing inside your head, uninterrupted. I didn't even turn on the lights. Just tossed my bag on the couch and headed straight to my bedroom, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the same blouse that now smelled faintly of roses and sweat. My phone lit up with low battery, but I didn't plug it in right away. I opened the photos from earlier, just quick snaps I'd taken at the venue. The candlelit aisle, the cascading roses, the arch I'd spent hours tweaking. In every image, the place glowed like a dream. So why did it feel like none of it mattered? I zoomed in on the arch, staring at the detail in the petals, the way they curled just slightly at the edges, the soft tones blending from ivory to blush like watercolors on canvas. It was perfect. I had made something beautiful. And still, my sister had looked at it like it was an inside joke I didn't get. The first tear caught me off guard. I wasn't even crying, just sitting there, breathing, but somehow my vision had blurred. I wiped it away roughly, annoyed with myself, but another one followed. And then another. I pulled my legs up onto the bed and sat cross-legged in the half-dark, clutching my phone like it could explain something I hadn't understood yet. "Why are they doing this to me?" I whispered. Not to the room, not to anyone in particular, just into the quiet, because I really wanted to know. What was it I had done that made me so disposable, not just overlooked, excluded? When did I become the one they rolled their eyes at? The one they wanted to keep outside the photo, the memory, the moment. A memory surfaced before I could stop it. I was 9, maybe 10. Vanessa had gotten a gold charm bracelet for her birthday. A little locket dangled from it with a heart etched on the front. I remember my mom whispering to her, "Don't show Chloe, okay? She'll get jealous. We'll get her something smaller." And they did, a keychain. I hadn't thought of that in years. But now it hit like a punch to the ribs. Another flash, me, home from college with a new internship offer, showing the email to my dad. He nodded, said, "That's good, sweetie," then turned to Vanessa and asked if she wanted to start a baking blog. She posted one recipe, got bored, deleted it a week later. And still, she was the one they praised, over and over. For dreams she never followed through on. For steps I had to fight like hell to take. The tears came faster now, quiet but relentless. My apartment, once my sanctuary, felt suddenly cold. Not just empty but hollow. The space between the walls seemed to widen around me, and even the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen felt miles away. I curled up tighter on the bed, wrapping my arms around my knees. I had given so much. I had tried so hard. And still I was the outsider, the afterthought, the sister who didn't make the guest list. I wanted to believe I was overreacting, that maybe it wasn't malicious, that maybe it was just a bad communication chain. But Vanessa's face today, the way she laughed, there was no misunderstanding that. It was dismissal on purpose. And my parents, they'd walked through that venue like I was just one more staff member in the background. I pulled my comforter around me even though it was too warm for it. Something about the weight made it easier to breathe. I stared at the ceiling, letting the tears dry on my cheeks. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want drama. I just wanted to be seen, to be valued, to be missed when I wasn't there. And right now, it was starting to feel like that would never happen. 2 days before the wedding, I woke up early, the sky outside my window a flat silver, the kind of gray that doesn't promise rain or sunshine, just stillness. I hadn't slept much. I'd stopped trying to make sense of things and started moving on autopilot. Work emails, coffee, feeding the cat, watering the plants. Tasks that didn't ask me to feel anything. The florist had texted me a confirmation that all floral structures were prepped for installation. The arch would be moved into place the next morning. All I had to do was show up, smile, and pretend the wound on my chest wasn't still bleeding quietly under every breath. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, staring into a mug of cooling coffee. My phone buzzed with a notification. The family group chat, one I rarely participated in anymore, but never had the heart to leave. At first, I thought it was just another update about guest seating or weather reports, but my eyes locked on the most recent message, one that blinked on screen for no more than 5 seconds before disappearing. I hope she won't be at Vanessa's wedding. From Mom, then message deleted. I froze. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to say something else. Anything, an apology, a whoops, or a wrong chat. But the only thing that followed was silence. They didn't know I'd seen it. They didn't know I had notifications turned on. I sat perfectly still, my hands around the mug growing colder by the second. My mother, the same woman who had raised me, sung lullabies to me, kissed my scraped knees, had typed those words. About me, not just forgotten, not overlooked, wished absent. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't some chaotic planning oversight. It was intentional, coordinated. A hope she had whispered behind digital walls where she thought I couldn't hear. But I did. I heard her loud and clear. A sharp breath left me, and with it went the last shred of denial I'd been clinging to. This is what they really think of me, I said aloud, voice flat, like I was narrating a documentary on someone else's life. Not just unwanted, unwelcome. I placed the mug on the table with a quiet click and stood, suddenly restless in my own skin. I walked through the living room, past the framed family photos I hadn't taken down yet, me and Vanessa on the beach as kids, the four of us on a hiking trip from years ago, all smiles and sun-kissed cheeks. Lives in frames. I turned on my heel, pacing once around the living room, hands on my hips, breath coming faster now, not from sadness but something else. Anger. It wasn't the hot, reckless kind, it was colder, clearer. The kind that doesn't shout but sharpens. It felt good. Because for the first time in this whole ordeal, I wasn't questioning if I was the problem. They were. They had twisted the narrative so many times that even I had started to believe I was too much. Too controlling. Too dramatic, too proud, but none of that justified erasing me, and certainly not hoping I'd stay gone. I picked up my phone again. My thumb hovered over the group chat for a moment. I could say something, confront them, screenshot it before they gaslit me again. But no, not yet. Something stronger than confrontation was rising in me now. I didn't want to fight. I wanted clarity. And if I couldn't be included in their carefully curated fantasy, maybe it was time to write my own. A new memory, a new story, one that didn't ask for permission to exist. My mind was already racing, ideas forming in the back of my throat like sparks gathering breath. I thought of my favorite beach, of the cousins who always laughed too loud, of the playlist I'd made months ago but never shared. If they didn't want me at the wedding, fine, but I wouldn't be home crying on the couch, either. I would reclaim my space in this family's story, even if I had to rewrite the chapter myself. It was the kind of plan people say you should sleep on before committing. I didn't. Within 12 hours of reading that message, I had reserved a row of beachfront bungalows off Folly Beach. Scheduled 2 food trucks, one for tacos, one for mini wood-fired pizzas, and arranged for fruit platters, acoustic speakers, folding chairs, a rented bar station, and enough tiki torches to make it look like I was opening a resort, not throwing a party. The wedding was Saturday. My gathering, also Saturday, same day, same time. Different version of what family meant. I didn't call it a protest. I didn't say anything bitter. The digital invite was simple, warm, hi friends, I'll be hosting a casual beach celebration this Saturday. Bonfire, music, barefoot dancing encouraged. If you've ever needed space to breathe, laugh, or just feel like you belong, this is it. Come as you are, you're welcome here. Chloe, I sent it to friends, coworkers, a few cousins. Some I hadn't spoken to in months. Some who were probably already packed for Vanessa's wedding. And then I waited. By Friday night, only 4 people had RSVP'd. Maya, of course, my old college roommate Camille, and 2 cousins, Ben and Zoe, who replied within minutes with heart emojis and about time you did something for you. Still, it wasn't exactly a guest list to rival a 200-person wedding. But I didn't flinch. I spent the morning of the wedding in the beach house I'd rented for myself, standing at the mirror as the sea air blew through the open windows. I wore a long white sundress. Not bridal, not flashy, just simple cotton that flowed like water. My hair was soft around my shoulders, and I wore no jewelry but a single rose gold bracelet Vanessa had given me years ago. I don't know why I wore it. Maybe to remember what used to be. Maybe to let it go. By 4 p.m., the sun was beginning to stretch long over the shoreline, and the sand was warm under my bare feet. Maya arrived first, of course she did, wearing a burnt orange maxi dress and carrying a canvas tote full of backup candles and mini champagne bottles. She saw me and stopped in her tracks. "Chloe," she whispered, eyes wide. "You look like a goddess." I smiled. "You always say that. This time I mean it more than usual." She hugged me tight. "This is going to be beautiful, I can feel it." Soon, Camille arrived with a Bluetooth speaker already humming a Sade remix. Then Ben and Zoe, hands full of drinks and bags of ice. I watched as they stepped onto the sand, looked around at the setup, pillows near the fire pit, handwritten signs that said take what you need and leave what no longer fits, and nodded in approval. "This is way better than the wedding," Ben said, offering me a cider. I smiled, but something tugged inside me, because I'd just seen it. A photo on Instagram. My cousin Sarah in a lilac satin dress standing with Vanessa and the rest of the bridesmaids at the rehearsal dinner the night before. She hadn't RSVP'd to my invite. Hadn't said a word, most of them hadn't. Maya noticed the shift in my face and gently took my phone. "You don't need this tonight." "I'm fine," I said quickly. "You're allowed to care." I looked out at the ocean. "I just thought maybe more people would come." Maya linked her arm through mine. "It's not about how many show up. It's about who chooses to, that's the difference." More guests trickled in. A couple coworkers from the firm, my Pilates instructor and her wife, even our old high school English teacher, Mrs. Dorman, whose son I'd invited half-jokingly. She showed up with cookies. Still, there were gaps, people who didn't reply, people who were choosing Vanessa. I had to make peace with the idea that this party might not be a moment of dramatic reclaiming, with fireworks and symbolic reunions and hundreds of people dancing in support of me. Maybe it was just mine, maybe that was enough. I stepped away from the group and walked to the edge of the beach where the tide kissed the shore in soft, foamy rhythm. The waves didn't care who came. They rolled in anyway. Behind me, laughter echoed. A guitar strummed. Maya's voice rose above the wind. "Chloe, get back here. We're starting the sparkler circle." I looked over my shoulder. Even if it wasn't a full crowd, it was my crowd. And the glow of the torches behind them told me that something was starting, maybe not a war, maybe not a victory, but a return, to myself. The sun slipped lower, casting a golden glaze over the sand and softening the edges of the world. Everything felt quieter by the water, the kind of hush that comes not from silence but from ease, like the air itself had unclenched. And then, just as Maya was pulling me back toward the group for the sparkler lighting, I saw them. Two figures walking up from the beach path, half silhouetted by the fading light. At first I thought I was imagining things, but then I recognized Ben's lopsided stride, and behind him, Zoe, her arms full of some kind of fruit basket wrapped in cellophane and ribbon. "Look who made it," Maya whispered, grinning. They reached us breathless, their cheeks pink from the walk. "Sorry we're late," Zoe said, setting down the basket. "Had to make a pit stop for this. It's got mango, lychee, strawberries dipped in white chocolate, everything you once said should be served at every major life event," Ben added with a wink. And just like that, the lump in my throat eased. I hugged them both tightly, inhaling the sunscreen and sea breeze on their clothes. "You came." "Of course we did," Zoe said. "This is way better than the wedding. There's actual personality here." "And no assigned seating," Ben added. "Or passive-aggressive chicken versus fish debates." I laughed genuinely for what felt like the first time in days. Other people followed one by one, then in pairs. Friends from old book clubs, a neighbor who remembered me from childhood, a girl I'd once mentored through an internship who said, "When I saw the invite, I cried. I don't know why. I just needed a reason to believe women can walk away and still glow." By the time the tiki lights flickered on, the beach was dotted with pockets of conversation, barefoot dancing, the smell of grilled pineapple and roasted marshmallows wafting through the air. Music thumped low in the background, a playlist I'd made weeks ago and never had the courage to play at a family event. Now it hummed into the breeze, perfectly imperfect. I stood near the fire pit, drink in hand, watching flames crackle and sparks drift skyward like tiny fireworks. Maya appeared beside me holding 2 coconuts with little umbrellas. "Your signature drink," she announced proudly. Coconut water, lime, and one aggressively festive paper straw. We clinked them together. "To what?" she asked. I took a long breath. "To not waiting for invitations that were never coming." She grinned. "And to writing your own." I smiled at her, then let my gaze travel across the scene. People were swaying, talking, barefoot and alive, lit by string lights and the kind of warmth that isn't in your bones but in your chest. "This is all I wanted," I said softly. Something light, joyful, nothing strategic, just people who are here because they want to be. You made it happen, Maya said, bumping her shoulder against mine. You're the reason. I wanted to argue, to deflect like always, but I didn't, because maybe for once she was right. Maybe I was the reason. It started with one clip. Maya filmed it on her phone, me dancing barefoot by the fire pit, a sparkler in one hand, my white dress fluttering around my ankles, cheeks flushed with laughter. Around me, cousins clapped to the beat of a slow acoustic cover of Here Comes the Sun. Someone passed fruit skewers across the circle. Someone else tossed a pillow into the sand for another round of stories. The joy was real. So when Maya asked, "Want me to post it?" I hesitated only for a second before saying, "Yeah, why not?" She handed me the phone. I added a short caption, didn't get a seat at the table, so I built my own. Family is what you make it, soft rebellions, beachfire not backfire. I posted it to my stories first, then my feed. It wasn't even 15 minutes before the notifications started. First, a handful of hearts. Then comments, "This is the real celebration. You look radiant, Chloe. The energy here, the wedding I just left." That one caught my eye. I clicked the username. It was my cousin Lucy, someone who had been tagged just hours ago in a photo with Vanessa, smiling stiffly in front of a flower wall. I blinked. Then the likes exploded. More people started tagging others. The reel was reshared. A couple of acquaintances I hadn't seen in years messaged me things like, "Thank you for reminding me I can walk away too." It should have made me feel triumphant. But what I felt was heat, spreading up my neck, a strange buzzing in my fingers. Like the moment right before a lightning strike, not fear exactly, but the knowledge that something irreversible was about to happen. Then my phone rang. Mom, I didn't answer, then again, Dad, then Vanessa, twice. I turned the ringer off, but they kept coming. When the 10th call from my mother came in, I stepped away from the fire pit, past the tiki torches, until the beach was quiet enough to hear the ocean again. The moon was high now, casting silver onto the water. I let the wind cool my skin. Then I answered. "Hello." There was silence for half a second, and then my father's voice, loud and shaking. "You ruined her wedding." No greeting, no breath, just that. "You humiliated her, you made this into a spectacle. How could you post that knowing people would see it while she's standing at the altar?" I waited for him to pause. He didn't. "You think this little pity party makes you righteous. It makes you look small. Vindictive. God, Chloe, you embarrassed the entire family." I took a breath, not rushed. Not trembling. "I saw Mom's message," I said evenly. "In the group chat, I hope she won't be at Vanessa's wedding. It was meant for Vanessa, you didn't mean for me to see it." Silence on the other end. "I wasn't being dramatic, you planned to keep me out, you wanted me gone." My father's voice returned, quieter now. "That wasn't, you don't get to silence me anymore." I looked back at the party, where Maya was refilling drinks and the fire crackled brighter against the sky. Laughter carried on the wind. It didn't sound small, it sounded free. "You made your choice," I said. "So did I hope you're proud of yourself," he spat. "She's crying." She wasn't crying when she laughed at me in front of everyone. She wasn't crying when she handed out invitations and left me out. I ended the call without waiting for a response, and stood there alone, the ocean to one side, the celebration behind me. I had told the truth, finally. The fire had burned low, soft embers, casting a flickering orange glow as the wind picked up along the dunes. Most of the food had been eaten. The music had mellowed into gentle acoustic covers, and I was just about to settle beside Maya with a blanket and a second coconut drink when I saw a figure moving quickly down the beach path. At first, I thought it was another late guest, maybe someone from my cousin Zoe's side, or one of Maya's friends arriving after a shift. But as she stepped into the reach of the torchlight, I froze. Vanessa, hair tangled, heels in hand, makeup smudged under her eyes, a small purse clutched tightly to her chest. She looked nothing like the curated version of herself I'd seen all week, the polished bride-to-be walking through rehearsal venues and cake tastings with her perfectly neutral expressions. This girl was raw. She spotted me instantly and crossed the sand with urgency. Everyone else noticed too, conversations stilled, heads turned. Maya stepped instinctively closer to me, protective, but I raised a hand gently. It was okay. Vanessa came to a halt a few feet away, breathing hard, mascara streaking like black watercolor down her cheeks. Her voice came out in a broken whisper. "I didn't know. Chloe, I didn't know how deep it went. I didn't move." "Not until tonight," she said. Not until Mom lost her mind over that video and Dad started yelling about how you were making a scene. Like you were some stranger trying to ruin everything. That's when I realized," she swallowed hard, "they've been managing me like eighth puppet, telling me who to invite, what to post, what to say to you." My heart thudded once hard. "You told me I was embarrassing," I said quietly. "You laughed at the flowers." She nodded, tears slipping freely now. "Because they told me it was over the top, that you'd take over, that you'd try to make it about you. And you believed them." "I did," she whispered. "I'm sorry." I wanted to say something sharp, something earned, but when I looked at her, barefoot, breathless, unraveling in front of my friends, I saw the girl who used to climb into my bed when the thunder scared her. The sister who'd once begged me to braid her hair before school every morning. And somehow the fire inside me softened. I took one step forward, then another. And then I opened my arms. Vanessa collapsed into them with a choked sob, burying her face into my shoulder. I held her. I let the anger melt, drip by drip, into something quieter. Not forgiveness yet, but a beginning. Behind us, someone sniffled, then someone else clapped gently. I pulled back, looking her in the eyes. "If they twisted you into believing I was the villain," I said, "then let's rewrite the ending." She blinked, confused. "What?" "This party," I said, turning slightly so she could see the warm lights, the people still gathered, the laughter slowly returning. "This can still be your wedding." She shook her head, breath hitching. "Chloe, right now," I said firmly. "This moment, these people, no photographers, no seating charts, no expectations, just love." Someone behind us cheered faintly. Zoe whooped and raised her drink. I turned to the group, lifted my glass high, voice steady and clear. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" They quieted instantly. I took a breath. Tonight was never supposed to be about revenge. It was about reclaiming something that was mine. But sometimes what you take back becomes something you can give away. I looked at Vanessa again, tears drying on her cheeks, her hands trembling in mine. "So, if you don't mind," I continued, "let's toast to something better, to choosing each other, to making space for the people who show up." I turned to Maya. "We still have the sparklers," she held up the box. "Ready and waiting." The crowd erupted, clapping, laughing, lifting glasses and flashlights. Someone restarted the playlist. Maya tossed sparklers into hands, and as the flames flickered to life, Vanessa leaned in, her voice soft. "You really would have given this to me," I nodded. "I already did," she laughed through fresh tears. "You're insane." "I know." And just like that, we walked back into the circle of light together. The beach looked different in the morning light, softer, quieter, as if the sand itself had exhaled after holding so much the night before. The last of the lanterns still hung lazily from the palm trees. A few forgotten flip-flops lay half-buried in the dunes. Seagulls circled low over the water, unbothered by whatever storm had passed through the night before. Vanessa found me near the shoreline, sitting barefoot on a flat rock with my knees hugged to my chest, watching the tide creep in. She didn't say anything at first, just sat beside me, close but not touching, and watched the waves roll and return. Her dress from last night was replaced by yoga pants and a hoodie that probably belonged to one of Zoe's boyfriends. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentler than I'd ever heard it. "I don't think I've ever seen you like that before," she said. I glanced over, curious. "Like what?" "Free," she said. "Powerful, loved." The words sat between us, exposed and weightless. I let them sink in. "I've been that all along," I said softly. "You just weren't looking." She winced a little, but nodded. "I know." We fell quiet again, letting the ocean speak for a while. "I didn't even realize how much they were shaping the narrative," she murmured. "I thought I was making choices, but really, I was just choosing what they approved of." "I know," I said. "I've been doing it most of my life too, until I stopped." Vanessa turned her head toward me. "I don't want to keep living like that, afraid of stepping out of line, afraid of being talked about, erased, disapproved of." I looked at her. Eyes were tired but clear, honest. "Then don't," I said. "Let's draw a new line." She gave me a shaky smile. "You do that after everything?" I gave a small shrug. "We're still sisters, they don't get to rewrite that." And there it was, quiet, simple peace. Not a grand reconciliation, not a social media post. Just two women sitting by the sea, finally choosing each other over the noise. The waves rushed in again, touching our feet before pulling back. Vanessa laughed. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "I think last night might have been the realest wedding I've ever seen." I smiled. "Then let's call it the beginning." 6 months later, the air smelled like honeysuckle and salt, and I could hear Vanessa's laugh before I even rounded the corner of the cafe patio. She was sitting at our usual spot, under the striped umbrella, two iced coffees already sweating on the table, her sunglasses pushed up into her hair. "Don't say it," she said, smirking as I sat down. "I'm only late because I couldn't find my sandals. Someone," she jabbed her thumb playfully toward herself, "has too many shoes and no organization." "I'm shocked," I deadpanned, taking a sip. "Didn't realize marriage made you lose your sense of order." She grinned, and I noticed again how much lighter she looked now. No tension in her shoulders, no watchful glances, just ease. We lived 5 blocks apart now. Close enough for impromptu dinners, lazy Sundays, and the occasional silent walk when one of us just needed company. We went to therapy together and apart. We didn't talk to our parents much. Not out of cruelty, out of necessity. Boundaries were a wall we built not to shut them out, but to protect what we were finally building. Later that weekend, during a hike with Maya along the bluff trail, we stopped to look out at the coastline below. The wind tugged at my ponytail, the sea wild and endless in the distance. Maya passed me her water bottle and said, "I still can't believe you threw your own wedding party and then gave it away." I laughed softly. "Yeah, neither can I," she tilted her head. "Any regrets?" I looked out at the waves crashing far below us, steady, unbothered, unafraid. "No," I said. "Turns out sometimes, losing your family means finally finding yourself." Maya slipped her arm through mine, and we kept walking. The wind didn't stop. And neither did we. That was the end of the story. And now I keep wondering about Vanessa. About the moment she walked away from our parents' wedding reception and chose to come find me on that beach instead. Did she do the right thing by finally stepping out from under their control, or would you have handled it differently if you were in her place? Tell me in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, please like and subscribe so we can keep having these honest conversations together.